the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. One man at the heart of everything is the Vice President, Mike Pence. We sat down with him at the White House today where he spoke about the repeal of Obamacare, Russia conspiracies, and the drama between the President and his Attorney General. Here's part of the conversation. Mr. Vice President, thanks for joining us.
You bet, Tucker.
So
welcome to the White House.
Those of us who are watching and our viewers who are basically supportive, I think, of the administration that things are not chaotic, as they seem sometimes from the outside.
We've been making incredible progress for the American people from the very beginning of this administration. 860,000 new jobs. ISIS is on the run in Iraq and in Syria. The largest increase in defense spending in more than 10 years. The President signed legislation rolling back an avalanche of red tape that came out of this last administration, and confirming Justice Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court are all part of the first 6 months of this administration. But as we speak, Congress is working to keep their promise and the President's promise to repeal and replace Obamacare. And before the year is out, we'll be on to passing the largest tax cut in American history. It is a time of great focus here at the White House, great promise for the country, and it's all owing to the leadership and the tenacity of President Donald Trump.
Given that there's so much else going on, why would the President tweet again this morning an attack on his Attorney General? Why not call Attorney General Sessions on the phone or bring him into the office and express those? Why do it in public?
Well, look, I think the President's been very candid that he was disappointed with the Attorney General's decision to recuse himself and to not know about his intention to do so before he was confirmed as the Attorney General of the United States. But I have to tell you, Tucker, you've been around Washington for a long time. I know the Washington way is to talk behind people's backs, but that's not President Donald Trump's approach. One of the great things about this president is you always know where you stand. And I think what the American people like about this president is he speaks candidly, he speaks openly. He's expressed his disappointment, but that doesn't mean that we don't recognize the good work the Justice Department has been doing under the Attorney General's leadership, taking on MS-13 gangs, removing them from the streets, confronting sanctuary cities, rolling back that policy across the country.
I think it's the public expression of it that rattles people, the idea that you would attack someone who works for you on Twitter. And I wonder if you worry personally if the President was displeased with you that he might tweet about you that way. Does that ever occur to you?
Well, I think one of the President's virtues is his candor. I think the reason why you saw 15,000 people in Youngstown, Ohio last night cheering this President on, the reason why you saw Boy Scouts and their families from all across America cheering the President on in that vast throng in West Virginia earlier this week is because people know we have a president who says what he means and means what he says. There's no attempt to hide his feelings, and his expressed disappointment here is very sincere. And he said, we'll see what happens in the future, but at least the American people know, and every member of the cabinet can know that you'll always know where you stand with President Trump.
So the White House press secretary has said the White House supports Russia sanctions. Do those sanctions help the United States in a material way that voters can understand, do you think?
Well, this administration has supported the renewal of sanctions with regard to Russian aggression in Ukraine, and we'll continue to work with the Congress on additional sanctions.
But does it help America to impose these sanctions on
Russia and North Korea and Iran? Well, I think that's a question for the President of the United States and our State Department to determine. Look, President Trump's made it very clear, Tucker, that he believes if we could get along better with other countries around the world, including Russia, that'd be a good thing. If we can find common cause with competitors and even potential adversaries around the world, that would be a positive. But the legislation that's moving through the Congress now, we'll let the Congress continue to work its will and evaluate that. But this president stands for advancing America's interests around the world, engaging countries around the world. But we've supported sanctions in the past, and we'll give every consideration to this bill when it comes to the president's desk.
We've got more of our interview with the Vice President later on in the show. President Trump renewed his attacks on the Attorney General today. He tweeted this morning. Why didn't AG Sessions replace acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe, a Comey friend who was in charge of Clinton investigation, but got big dollars, $700,000, for his wife's political run from Hillary Clinton and her representatives, drain the swamp. The tweet comes one day after the president publicly scolded his attorney general.
I am disappointed in the attorney general. He should not have recused himself. I want the attorney general to be much tougher on the leaks from intelligence agencies. I told you before, I'm very disappointed with the attorney general, but we will see what happens. Time will tell. Time will tell.
Corey Lewandowski was Donald Trump's campaign manager during the 2016 Republican primaries. He was on the plane yesterday when the president went to speak in Ohio, and he joins us tonight. Corey, thanks a lot for coming on.
Great to be here.
So the president's disappointed that the attorney general recused himself. Got it. What's the point of continuing to say that?
Well, I think what he's trying to tell the American people is the reason Jeff Sessions shouldn't have recused himself for all other things is he was part of the campaign. He saw there was no Russia involvement, there was no collusion, there was no coordination, so he really had no reason to recuse himself whatsoever.
Okay, well, Franz Ferdinand shouldn't have gone to Sarajevo that day, but he did. So, like, it happened. So what's the point of continuing to revisit this? It conveys the sense that the president is distracted from his priorities, which are making the country better, and that the staff is in disarray. And, like, I don't really see an upside to it.
Look, the president's priorities are very clear. He wants to get repeal and replace done of Obamacare. The vote yesterday with Mike Pence breaking that tie was critical to move that piece forward. It's a campaign pledge that he has promised to do, and he will deliver on. Now, you have to hold those U.S. senators accountable who, for 7 years, voted to replace or repeal Obamacare. And guess what? Now they're not voting for it anymore. It's hypocrisy at its finest. And what we need to do is get the agenda done. That's the most important thing.
I agree completely. And as you note correctly, I think it's really hard because a lot of Republicans in Washington don't agree with the agenda at all.
That's right.
It's a populist agenda. They're not populist. They don't want to do it. And so it takes an enormous intensity, focus, energy to get it done. And anything that distracts you from the task is counterproductive. Like, I don't know, spending 3 days in a row beating up on your own attorney general.
Look, I don't disagree, Tucker, but this is very important. The president is completely focused on getting the legislative agenda done.
Right.
He needs to make sure Obamacare is done first, the repeal and replace. At minimum, repeal. We need to get a tax cut done. There's no question about that.
Right.
We need to repatriate the money from overseas so we can have more money here. We need to cut the corporate tax rate. These are the priorities of the president. Other priorities, infrastructure spending, $1 trillion moving forward. And then build the wall. It's something he's pledged to do, and we have to hold people accountable. And those elected officials who are serving in the Congress, who voted for these things in the past, have to be held accountable, and we have to get this agenda done immediately.
Well, you know who voted for these things are voters, like the American public, tens of millions of them. And if they are achieved, none of this will matter. The Russia nonsense, the fight with Sessions, those will be footnotes. Trump will be judged on those big things. And again, that's I suppose, my concern. So as a practical matter, do you think the Attorney General is going to stay?
Look, I think that's a question that only the president can give a definitive answer on. But I do think at the end of the day, the president and the Attorney General are going to have a good working relationship moving forward. Jeff Sessions has done some great work as it relates to MS-13 gangs, as it relates to the border crossing and the reduction of individuals coming across the border illegally. These are the priorities of the president. He's pledged that he's going to eradicate MS-13. We're going to stop the illegal border crossings. This is what Jeff is doing as the Attorney General. He's doing a good job on that. He needs to continue to focus on that and continue to move the conservative agenda from the Attorney General's perspective.
If he left, what do you think would happen? Like, who would replace him? Like, what would that look like if the Attorney General, and I understand the president's mad at him, but if Sessions today said, you know, I'm kind of sick of these tweets, I'm out of here, I'm going back to Mobile, what do you think would happen then? You
know, I think Jeff is a patriot. I really do. And I think Jeff is going to continue to serve his country. I hope he continues to serve his country in the capacity as the Attorney General. Look, obviously, there are a number of potentially capable individuals who could serve in that capacity. But that being said, Jeff is the right man for the job right now, and I think he's going to stay in that job. Look, I don't have any inside knowledge of it, but I think Jeff Sessions is going to continue to serve as the Attorney General for as long as the president wants him to be the Attorney General.
I think you do have inside knowledge, and I think that's a sign that he will probably stay, and I think that's probably good because it's hard to see kind of what would happen next. Quickly, on health care, what's your best guess?
It has to get done. And this is where the president, who's a great closer, a great deal maker, is going to get those people to get, at minimum, the repeal done. If we get the repeal done, very important. If not, Obamacare implodes on itself, and the American people are devastated.
Corey Lewandowski, thanks a lot for that.
Thank you.
Good to see you. President Trump surprised everyone this morning by announcing the military would no longer fund soldiers' gender transition surgery. After the break, we'll talk to a Democratic congressman and ask how those surgeries help America win wars. Plus, Debbie Wasserman Schultz spent months defending one of her aides. Now he's been arrested while trying to flee back to Pakistan. It's a big story you're not going to see on a lot of other channels. Mark Stein joins us in a minute to discuss what exactly happened. In a surprise announcement this morning, President Trump reversed the previous administration's order to admit transgendered individuals into the military. The president made the announcement on Twitter in the AM. He tweeted this: after consultation with my generals and military experts, be advised the U.S. government will not accept nor allow transgendered individuals to serve in the U.S. military. Our military must be focused on decisive and overwhelming victory and cannot be burdened with tremendous costs and medical disruption that transgender in the military would entail. Thank you. Democrats were not grateful for that. They quickly became very angry. Here's part of what they said.
This disgusting ban will weaken our military and land that it defends.
Our nation is not safer when we sanction discrimination.
Because of President Trump's announcement, America will be less safe.
The President of the United States this morning announced he is blowing 15,000 holes in our military readiness.
It's undermining, I think, our national defense.
This disgusting action endangers the lives of American service members and makes our country less safe.
Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney represents New York in the House of Representatives, and he joins us tonight. Congressman, thanks a lot for coming on.
Bet.
So I understand why people don't like this, but to not like it and to claim that it makes our country less safe are two different things. How does this make our country less safe?
Well, how about SEAL Team 6?
Okay.
I think you'd agree they make our country more safe. So Kristen Beck, member of SEAL Team 6, she's a transgender woman, 7 combat tours, earned the Bronze Star with Valor and a Purple Heart. She's done a hell of a lot more for our country than you and I ever will. And she made our country safer. That's the person we're going to remove from military service.
I don't think she served as a transgender SEAL, though.
No, but there are thousands of transgender service members serving honorably and meeting the tests, the high tests that the military expects of its service members. We should absolutely use the standard the president started with, which is keeping our country safe. And part of keeping our country safe is keeping good people in the military. These are good people.
Right. Well, transgenders have never been allowed to serve openly and to have their transitions paid for by the U.S. government. This is something that began in a gradual way with the Obama administration. This country's been around for almost 250 years, winning a bunch of wars. That's not a slight on any specific person. I'm merely skeptical at why this makes our country less safe. I don't actually think that you can show that. I think you're just mad about it and you're using our national security to make your point.
Well, look, there are thousands of people serving honorably. We won a bunch of wars before we integrated the armed services with African Americans, and we won a bunch of wars without women serving. But we have an enormous number of talented, diverse people serving. We wouldn't believe we were more safe because we excluded whole groups of Americans. And look, the point is that right now, thousands of transgender service members are serving with distinction. And there's not a reason on earth that you would kick them out of the military except for prejudice, and that's wrong.
That's just, that's just a silly thing to say. I mean, this is a legitimate debate, and for you to say anyone who doesn't agree with you is a bigot. I mean, there's a massive call. Wait, hold on, slow down.
Well, I didn't say that.
Yes,
but
you did.
I said that the reason would be
yes, you did. You said the only reason is prejudice.
Right.
In other words, if you disagree with me, being a holy man, you're a bad person. My only point is there are two sides to this. There's a cost to this. There are difficulties integrating people. There are questions about what it means to be transgender. These are real adult questions, and you're blowing them off by describing anyone who doesn't agree with you as motivated by prejudice, and that's childish.
What is the reason for taking members of the military who are serving now, thousands of them, with distinction, without a problem, and kicking them out on this basis? What would that reason be?
Well, I mean, the reason is articulated by the people who oppose this is that it's expensive to pay for the physical transition, the medical transition from one sex to the other. And that paying that at a time when the military is scrambling for funds is a distraction from the core mission, which is winning wars.
Right. Well,
the onus is on you, since the U.S. military has never had this policy in its history, to show that paying for sex change operations is going to somehow make us more likely to beat, I don't know, Al-Qaeda.
No, excuse me. We have that policy now, and we've had more than a year to see how it works. and there hasn't been any diminishment of readiness or any disruption of any kind. And what we know is men like Shane Ortega, another transgender service member, who conducted hundreds of missions in Afghanistan and Iraq, multiple combat tours.
As a transgender person? No, that's not true.
Yes, as a matter of fact. And there are right now people like Riley Dosh, a cadet, who just graduated from the military academy at West Point.
What you're engaging in is demagoguery. I'm asking you bigger, broader questions, which is it an actual concern that the Pentagon would have to pay for sex change operations? Do you think that's a valid military expense?
Well, would you
Do you
say,
think these are real questions about how to integrate people in close quarters living who haven't fully transitioned? To blow those off as like bigotry is just wrong.
Well, I think to be fair, we've spent years studying this. Rand Commission did a big report on this.
We haven't spent years studying this.
Well, actually, the Obama administration did exactly that.
This is brand new.
The Rand Corporation study looked at this in detail before they changed the policy. We now have a year of experience. And by the way, under your argument, you could also say, you know, women may get pregnant and they may incur additional medical costs. So we shouldn't allow women to serve in the military.
But I would say, hold on. First of all, I'm not arguing that. I'm arguing something very specific. So don't liken it to another argument. Second, any question that bears on military readiness is a direct question. I'm a patriotic person. I would love to serve the country. I'm too old. It takes me 27 minutes to run 5K. I'm not qualified. So the question is not what's empowering for me, it's what's good for the national defense. And that's not the lens through which you're looking at this.
But Kristen Beck is qualified and performed heroically on SEAL Team 6.
Look, I'm not attacking Kristen Beck. I'm merely saying Kristen Beck was not.
Excuse me, you are directly attacking.
You know what? I think it's very frustrating speaking with ideologues like you because everything you disagree with is an attack on someone.
Tucker,
I am not attacking Kristen Beck.
You are defending a policy that would remove a decorated member of SEAL Team 6 from the United States military. If that's not an attack, sir, I don't know what is.
You are an extremist posing as a rational person. Well, I'm trying to have a rational debate, and you're telling me I'm attacking a Navy SEAL, which I'm emphatically not doing. Well, and you should be ashamed for using such a low tactic in what I'm trying to make a rational conversation.
It is a fact that
I'm attacking
a woman named Kristen
SEAL.
Beck would not be allowed to have performed her service
as a transgender
which
person
also means
in combat.
that taxpayers incurred no health care costs associated with that, which is also a fact that is at play here. The fact of the matter
is why we can't solve problems, because people who yes, it is. Because what you're doing is spewing propaganda and saying, no, because I'm asking honest questions, and you're throwing back dumb propaganda in my face and calling me a bigot.
I think you have to own the implications of the position you support. And it would mean that people who are serving with distinction are being separated from the military for an arbitrary reason.
This is why.
And it's wrong.
Okay, I'll tell you why. This is why the Pentagon didn't announce it themselves today. Because this policy has very limited support in the Pentagon, but they're afraid because of demagogues like you
that
they're going to be attacked for saying what is obvious, which is the point of the military is to win wars. And saying that will get people like you to call them bigots, so they don't want to say it.
That's my standard.
Right.
We want a military that's going to win wars, and the people who are serving with distinction are part of that. And by the way, they're earning those benefits that we're providing to them.
Right.
They're earning it by putting their lives on the line. And they're doing more than you and I ever will to protect our country. And before we go after them,
stop your demagoguery. I've had enough.
I think you should own
Thanks, Congressman. Spare me. Debbie Wasserman Schultz employed a Pakistani immigrant for 7 months, even though he was a known security risk, suspected of a bunch of different crimes, apparently tried to flee the country today. What happened there? Mark Stein is here to discuss that question next. Plus, more of our interview with the Vice President coming up. February for posing a security risk, and yet for some reason, Wasserman Schultz kept him on her payroll until just yesterday. Not only that, but she actively tried to sabotage the investigation into Awan. She threatened Capitol Police after they seized a laptop. What is going on here? Mark Stein has been following this story carefully. He's an author and columnist, and he joins us tonight. What is this about, Mark?
Well, it's about everything that the Democrats and the media have spent months trying to prove that the Russia investigation, so-called, is about. Everything they've looked for and failed to find in the Russia investigation is, in fact, going on under their noses in this particular story. We have computer interference. We have, as you said, a powerful political figure attempting to interfere with a federal investigation, as Debbie Wasserman Schultz did when she threatened the head of the Capitol Police. We have actual criminal elements. This guy was arrested trying to flee the country. We have interference from foreign politicians. These guys were given $100,000 by a prominent Iraqi politician. In other words, everything that they have been looking for in the Russia investigation and failed to find is actually staring them in the face with this mysterious guy. And that's actually before the more obvious problems with the story, which is how does one guy from Pakistan, from Lahore, his wife, their two brothers and at least one of their sisters-in-law end up providing IT services for dozens of Democrat powerful figures. That in itself is actually pretty unusual.
Well, it is. It's an odd story from start to finish, and maybe weirdest is even after this guy was under a public cloud, even after Debbie Wasserman Schultz had threatened, apparently, the Capitol Police looking into it. And this is a news story. He worked for her until yesterday?
That's
what
right.
would that? Why would she do that?
Well, he was arrested at Dulles Airport on Monday night. She terminated his employment, which was, by the way, at the expense of you and I and every other taxpayer, on Tuesday. Most of the other Democrat congressmen for whom this family work, they got rid of this family, both the wife and the brother-in-law and so on, back at the end of February, beginning of March. Occam's razor would suggest that the reason that she kept him on was that because she was additionally head of the DNC, he had too much on her. That's the basic explanation. He knew her iPad password, which means, by the way, you no longer need to worry about whether Vladimir Putin gave all the DNC emails to the WikiLeaks guy at the Colombian embassy or whatever it is in London. Never mind that. The fella arrested at Dulles Airport trying to flee back to Lahore actually had Debbie Wasserman Schultz's password, and there's so much collusion going on here that Debbie actually colluded with the guy fleeing to Lahore by giving him the password herself. So if if it is ever expanding investigation, Bob Mueller would like something else to set his 37 Hillary donors to work on. They can wrap this thing up in the next 48 hours because it's all staring them in the face.
Well, here's we referenced earlier the threats that she made against Capitol Police in this, and that's a pretty strong thing to say about somebody. I think we actually have tape of this in case anyone doubts it. Here's Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
My understanding, the Capitol Police is not able to confiscate members' equipment when the member is not under investigation. I think you're violating the rules when you conduct your business that way, and should expect that there would be consequences.
Ooh, right. There will be consequences, says the member of Congress to the person who in effect works for her.
Yeah, and that's a powerful House committee member threatening law enforcement, saying if you know what's good for you, you're going to return what she calls my laptop, which is in effect a laptop that this guy, the guy who's got borrowing money from Iraqi politicians and whatnot, is in the control and under the supervision of the guy who was arrested. And she's threatening. So again, this isn't like Trump saying obliquely to Jim Comey, can you assure me that my hopes that I will always have your loyalty will be. It's nothing to do with anything as oblique as hope and loyalty. She's saying, give me this piece of evidence in a criminal investigation, or you guys are going to get it. And
she's not a master of the oblique. She's pretty explicit.
And what's interesting is this guy, his wife, the brothers-in-law, the brothers and the sister-in-law, they've made $5 million, it's estimated, from providing, because the Democrats, as we know, require highly specialized computer services.
Unbelievable.
You have to be able to go to Home Depot, buy the biggest hammer, and that costs money. These guys got $5 million, and they're still borrowing money from Iraqi politicians.
We're going to get the details in the hearings. Mark, great to see you tonight.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
Replace or bust for the Republicans on health care. A straight repeal of Obamacare failed today in the Senate after 7 Republicans joined Democrats to defeat it. The Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's final option now is to get 50 senators to support some kind of replacement bill. We asked the Vice President about the Obamacare repeal effort, And here's what he said. So you've all had a tough time. You've been working hard to wrangle votes from Republicans in the Congress. You cast a tie-breaking vote in one yesterday on health care. The Wall Street Journal had a piece on Monday pointing out that members of Congress and their staffs in Washington have a separate arrangement. They have an exemption from some of the requirements of Obamacare, and they get a pretty massive taxpayer subsidy for their health care. It's possible by administrative decree to end this special treatment that members of Congress have awarded themselves. The president could do that. Are you all planning to do that?
What we're planning to do is keep our promise to the American people. President Trump made it clear throughout the campaign last year that we were going to repeal and replace the disastrous failure of Obamacare. I mean, look, every promise that was made to pass Obamacare 7 years ago, when I was a member of Congress, turned out to be a lie. They said, you like your doctor, you can keep it. You like your health insurance, you can keep it. They said the cost of health insurance would go down. And every single one of those proved to be false. And the president and I met just a few days ago at the White House with families that are bearing the burden of rising premiums and the lack of insurance, the lack of ability to choose your doctor. The president's absolutely determined, as you saw this week, to continue to hold Congress accountable. And we couldn't be more grateful for the leadership in the House that moved legislation to repeal and replace Obamacare. And we're grateful for all the members of the Senate who moved us forward. The debate is going on even as we speak. And we're not going to rest until we give the American people a fresh start on health care.
I think most people would be for that. But why should members of Congress and their staffs have a better deal, not be subject to the same rules that everyone else is?
Well, it's, again, that's pretty typical in Washington, D.C., isn't it? I mean, over the years, you more often than not see one set of rules for the American people and one set of rules for the political class here in our nation's capital. But as we move forward, the point is that whether the president makes a decision, it would be his decision, whether to rescind that special treatment for members of Congress and their staffs. But what we want is a health care system that works for all of the American people.
What does that mean? Does that mean cheaper coverage for people? Does it mean a larger percentage of the population covered? Does it mean better health care outcomes? If you could name the primary goal of the replace part of the deal, what would it be?
Well, I think the primary goal first is to give people freedom over their own health care choices again. Right now, it's amazing to think at the center of Obamacare is a requirement that every American buy health insurance, whether they want it or need it or not. And if they don't buy health insurance, as the government orders them to do, they have to pay a fine to the federal government. 6.5 million Americans last year paid a fine to the government because their choices in health insurance they were being forced to buy were so bad. And I've heard from those families, the president heard from those families all across the country. So first is restoring freedom to the American people to make their own health care choices. The second thing is restore the kind of free market that will allow the health insurance innovation to happen to bring down the cost of health insurance for every American. Senator Ted Cruz and others have worked on legislation to give people wider choices. The president is determined before we're done with this process, and maybe this will take another bill after this one, to give people the ability to buy health insurance across state lines. And lastly, what we want to do is end the one-size-fits-all Medicaid for our most vulnerable population. The president believes the time has come for us to give states the ability to reform Medicaid the way we did a little bit when I was governor of Indiana, in ways that'll better meet the needs of our most vulnerable
citizens. So it sounds like choice is the key goal here, giving people more choice.
Well, giving people freedom, giving people more choices,
allowing them to make
lower cost insurance, and allowing states to innovate and to be creative about the ways that we can meet the needs of our most vulnerable.
But if after a year or two of giving people more choices, millions fewer Americans had health insurance, would that be worth it?
Well, it's you know, the very essence of living in a free society is people get to make their own decisions. But the president and I truly believe that if you lower the cost of health insurance, if you give Americans more choices in health insurance, that more Americans will choose, more employers will choose to have and to offer health insurance to their employees and have health insurance for their families. The reality is today, President Obama promised that health insurance premiums would go down by $2,500 a year. They've gone up by more than that amount on average around the country. And it's hurting families. It's driving people away from being able to afford health insurance. And the President, I believe, that more choices, more freedom, more free market principles, and more state flexibility is going to meet the needs of our healthcare economy in the 21st century.
So my last question is a political one. If all of that's true, why can't Republicans in the Congress see that? Why are so many saying, I can't vote for this version because I don't want to pay the cost at the next election?
Well, I think the President and I are very encouraged by how many members of the House and Senate are saying yes.
But the ones who are afraid, what are they afraid of, do you think?
Well, look, the House of Representatives labored through a very challenging process. As you know, the President's talked about the fact that Obamacare is dead. This system is collapsing around us. You know, there's the old saying that it's hard to turn a big ship at sea, but it's actually harder to turn a sinking ship, Tucker, and that's what Obamacare is. And the reality is members of Congress have been working carefully. There's been very careful compromise from the majorities in the House and now in the Senate to move the debate forward. But it's all about making sure that as we transition back to free market, to a system of state-based innovation and reform, that we make sure that that happens in an orderly way as the President committed during the campaign, and that Americans that are relying on health insurance today can know that there's going to be a system in place, the ability through tax credits and other opportunities for them to have even more affordable health insurance that they can choose.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for that.
Good to be with you, Tucker.
Thank you. Remember the mysterious Trump dossier? The one from Russia? Well, it's never been verified, but for a lot of people, it is proof the president colluded with that dastardly Vladimir Putin. Up next, we'll talk to someone who said the dossier is the work of professional smear artists, and he would know because they tried to do it to him. Stay tuned. All the way back to January, you may recall the existence of an unverified dossier claiming that the president was once compromised by Russian intelligence in some pretty flagrant ways. Well, there's no proof any of that is accurate, but the dossier is still a key piece of proof that the president colluded with Russia, according to a lot of people. Well, Thor Halvorson is the president of the Human Rights Foundation. He recently testified to Congress that the dossier was the work of professional smear experts, and he would know this because they've targeted him as well. Thor Halvorson joins us right now. Great to see you tonight, Thor. So these guys, who are these guys, and why'd they go after you?
Well, Fusion GPS, you know, they try and promote themselves as a sort of opposition research or strategic intelligence firm, when really what Fusion GPS is, it's a company that sells itself to the highest bidder to bring together smear campaigns and to try and destroy honest, good people who are going against their clients. In my particular case, it was whistleblowing against a group of criminal Venezuelans operating a company called Derwick Associates that sold 12 faulty electric plants in Venezuela. They had no experience before, they had nothing to do with the sector, and yet they got $3 billion worth of business in Venezuela, of which they skimmed around $2 billion. And then they hired to go after those of us who were opposing them and blowing the whistle on them.
Personally?
Very personal. Yes. In fact, imagine waking up one day and seeing a headline in a fringe website that says that I'm a neocon scam artist, and then you read the actual article and it says that I, you know, there in some Facebook posts and Twitter posts that they put out, it says that it falsely says that I sleep with children, it says that I'm a heroin addict, it says that I've been to rehab, it says that I'm an embezzler. I mean, imagine accusations that are so horrible that being innocent isn't enough.
Right,
that,
exactly.
Accusations so horrible you can't explain them. That is what Fusion GPS, that's what they specialize in.
Did they do that to you? So they literally did that to you?
Yes, they literally did this to me. And I'm not the only person that they did this to. They also did it to an investigative blogger in London that was also following the exact same case, and it was the same accusations again. It was drug addiction, pedophilia. In his case, they threw drug trafficking and rape and a few other things. These are not good people. They are people who used to be serious journalists and are now trading their credentials in exchange for very high fees from criminals abroad.
Those are really awful things to say. We're almost out of time, but do you know who might have paid Fusion GPS to create this dossier on the president?
Well, I can't speak to the dossier about the president. I have zero knowledge about it. I haven't even read it. But I do have knowledge about Fusion GPS. And what I hope is that both the Senate and the Department of Justice pursue them for FARA violations and get to the bottom of each and every single entity that pays them for this sort of thing. They try and cloak everything under attorney-client privilege. They cloak everything with lawyers. These are not good people, and they really are. They're turning journalism into a sewer, and they have a very long history of doing so.
Fascinating. For our viewers who don't live here, FARA is Foreign Agent Registration Act, meaning they're taking money from foreigners and not reporting it, which is a big deal. Thor, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Tucker.
Fascinating. The Twilight Zone, Black Mirror, nope, just reality. Up next, we'll tell you about a Wisconsin company that's planning to stick microchips into the bodies of its own employees. Stay tuned. The terrifying future of every 80s science fiction movie has finally arrived. A vending machine company in Wisconsin is offering to implant its employees physically in their bodies with microchips. Three Square Market says the chips, which are about the size of a grain of rice, can be used to access computers, operate printers, or buy goods from vending machines. Todd Westby is the owner of Three Square Markets. He's welcoming us to the brave new world, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Westby, thanks a lot for coming on.
Yes, thank you for having me, Tucker. Glad to be here.
So, I mean, on the one hand, of course, I salute your, American innovation. On the other hand, I shiver in horror at the level of control you'll have over your employees once you implant microchips in their bodies. Why would you do that?
Well, that's really a misconception regarding the microchips. They're not GPS devices. We cannot track them in the workplace at all. They're basically used for conveniences that happen at the workplace and around the world. There are really no tracking devices at all, and we can't trace them anywhere.
Yeah. Leaving aside the fact that, of course, I don't believe you, why not just give your employees cards? Do they not have pockets in their clothing? I mean, why would you want to inject them with something like this?
They have access to proximity cards, which will do the same thing as a chip. They also have access to password or PIN pads with 4-digit logins that will get them in the building. However, it's much more convenient to a lot of our employees, being a technology company of break room markets and payment systems. It's the convenience factor that our employees are really in favor of.
Do you tattoo them with anything?
No, we do not. It's basically a implant that goes right beneath the skin between your thumb and your forefinger.
Now, if an employee had this implanted in his or her hand and then left your company, quit, could you pull them back using the chip? Could you instruct them to come back?
No, we cannot. Chances are they'll probably keep the chip in, because we have a lot of non-employees that are actually going to be implanted with the chip on Tuesday next week, along with we've had calls from several hospitals and about over 20 businesses that are very interested in getting this chip.
Now, how you can change their opinions with these chips, or their thoughts with the chips?
Well, we don't change their opinions or thoughts with this chips at all. No, there's no frequencies, no weird science that happens with it. It's just basically an RFID chip that has to be held within 6 inches of a proximity reader. And earlier you mentioned passwords and people having access to them. One of the benefits of this chip is it literally eliminates passwords whatsoever anywhere within the business, and you can log in with your microchipped hand so that nobody knows the passwords, not even you.
Oh. Now, of course, I'm joking in a lot of my questions, but when you say there's no weird science in this, we're just injecting a microchip into your body so you can use the printer, we would at least concede there's some weird science in it.
Well, it is out there as far as technology goes, but so was the driverless car 10 years ago, and now we have people sitting in it without a driver.
Huh. That's still weird technology. Technology. Last question, Todd, really quick. Would you be comfortable if the government or Amazon, same thing, I guess, did this to you?
Well, they do it to the military right now. The government does, and it's a huge tactical advantage out on the fields, also with children. And we had a country call us regarding kidnappings. They're having a problem. So I guess it's the next thing.
Okay. I'm going to opt out. But thank you, Todd. I really appreciate it.
Thank you,
We'll be
Tucker.
right back. Sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and especially groupthink. Don't forget to DVR it if you haven't. The 5 is next. We will see you tomorrow. Have a great night.